The leading organizational change methods in use today, like the ADKAR model, the Kotter 8 Steps model, and the Lewin Change Model, were developed 20, 25, and 70 years ago, respectively. And while such methods might have worked well in a world of stability, pliant competition, and moderate growth, today such methods represent a liability. You see, such methods were not developed to handle the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous conditions that we operate in today. Hence, to be successful in solving your organization's most intractable challenges, a new change method is needed. A method that is attuned to the times in which we live. A method that leverages complexity and embraces ambiguity. In short, a method that was designed to solve the complex adaptive challenges of today. Let's discuss. Welcome to another episode of All Things OD, where I'm here to help you offer more, be more, and live more. Whether you're serving as an OD practitioner, change management professional, or business transformation consultant. I'm your host, Randall Scott, and it's great to be with you here today. As mentioned, in today's episode, we're going to discuss a new theory of change, what we refer to as the complexity leadership model, and how you can use such model to help solve your organization's most intractable issues. Now, before we begin, I want to first let you know about a new flagship course that we're offering called Leading Through Complexity. This course is an 8-week online action learning-based course that will help you learn how to lead transformational change efforts in less time with less resistance, and that will sustain over time. Our next cohort is forming now, and seats are limited. So if you're interested in changing the way that change is done, visit our website at henosispartners.com/LTC, or if you're watching on YouTube, simply click on the link in the description below. All right, let's jump in. So we begin by first introducing what is the complexity leadership theory of change model. We define the complexity leadership model as a modern, rapid, inquiry-based, foresight-driven strategic learning model. So let's dive into each component of this definition. Modern reflects a new understanding of the role and amplified potential of integrating diagnostic OD, dialogic OD, and experiential learning into a powerful, accretive problem-solving methodology. Rapid speaks to the experiential sequence of the complexity leadership model and how it's rooted in the iterative method, whereby self-organized teams deliver value every 2 to 4 weeks via agile sprints to achieve a stated target condition in a desired direction of travel. Inquiry-based speaks to the core of the complexity leadership model, whereby we leverage dialogic or inquiry-based tools and techniques to expose uncritically held assumptions, cognitive biases, and limiting beliefs for challenge and possible revision to bring about transformative change. Foresight-driven speaks to how strategic foresight serves as a differentiating social technology of the complexity leadership model, whereby we intentionally engage with the emerging future to transform the present. This element of our definition speaks to engaging the edges of our organizations and beyond. And finally, strategic learning speaks to how the intent or essence of the complexity leadership model is less about producing certain results or defined outcomes than it is about deep learning, about strategic learning, for example, about how best to solve a complex adaptive challenge, or resolve a cross-functional conflict, or exploit an emerging opportunity, or vision the future. So this is how we define the complexity leadership theory of change model. It's a model that's changing the way that change is done. Now you might be asking, why is there a need for a new change model? Well, as alluded to in our introduction, the world has changed. You see, we're now operating in VUCA-like conditions today, of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which is affecting all organizations, all industries, all social structures, including broader humanity. And these dynamics will only increase over time. So while this might provide a rationale for why a new change method is needed, how did we get here? How did we get to this point? Well, it begins with increased globalism. As advances in technology and communications and free trade, organizations' organic desire to grow and Wall Street pressure have collectively contributed to this increased globalism trend over the past 30 years. And with increased globalism comes increased interconnections and interdependencies, as the organizations that we work with now interface with a greater number of customers, partners, and vendors worldwide. And from these increased interconnections and interdependencies comes increased complexity, specifically increased social complexity and increased dynamic complexity. Social complexity speaks to the number of perspectives or points of view that weigh in or that have a voice in a particular situation or context. And dynamic complexity speaks to cause and effect. And what happens with increased interconnections and interdependencies is that we see increased social complexity. We see a greater number of perspectives and points of view that want to weigh in on a situation or context. And in addition to that, with those increased interconnections and interdependencies comes a greater number of causes and effects. Together then, increased social complexity and increased dynamic complexity leads to increased overall turbulence or volatility that we see in the marketplace and that affect the organizations that we're working with. And it's from this increased turbulence or volatility that results in another form of increased complexity, what we refer to as generative complexity. And generative complexity speaks to novel conditions. It speaks to how our learnings of the past increasingly become diminished in either informing our present or, lesser still, the future. What is also contributing to increased generative complexity is that we are now operating in an Industry 4.0 world of hyper-interconnectivity and the Internet of Things, and AI-driven tech disruption. Together then, increased turbulence and volatility and operating in this hyper-connected AI-driven world results in increased uncertainty for all involved. For us as change makers, for those that we partner with to bring about change, and for the organizations that we work with. And it's because of all of these conditions, the complexity, the volatility, the uncertainty, that there's an increased need to solve problems differently. Again, the change methods of old, the ADKAR model, the Kotter 8 steps model, the Lewin Change Model, and others, were not designed for conditions of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And so a new change method is needed, a method that is attuned for the times in which we live, a method such as the complexity leadership model. What we need as change agents is a method to work with complexity. We need a method that will help us navigate uncertainty. And we seek such things because working in this manner ultimately creates system resilience and the ability for an organization to thrive. Consequently, significant methodological shifts are occurring. With the rise of VUCA-like conditions, we have seen the slow but steadily increasing transition of the field of organization development from use of diagnostic OD to use of dialogic OD to now use of the complexity leadership model. And the reason for this, as mentioned, is that the complexity leadership model is attuned to leveraging complexity. It's attuned to embrace uncertainty. It's attuned to solve complex adaptive challenges in any domain, at any scale, and of any variant. So what is the focus of the complexity leadership model? Well, the complexity leadership model reflects a new social technology to address the complex adaptive challenges of today. And a complex adaptive challenge can be characterized in the following ways. It's the type of challenge where it's difficult for people to agree on what specifically the problem or issue is or how best to solve it. It's a challenge where applying existing process, procedures, and know-how does not provide the solution needed. In other words, the past does not adequately inform the present, and lesser still, the future. It's a challenge where solutions emerge not from certain expertise that one possesses, or a title that one holds, but rather from a process of highly diverse actors agreeing to come together, to learn, to adapt, and challenge one another to achieve a common goal. In addition to that, we can say that a complex adaptive challenge is the type of challenge that requires influencing and altering mental models of individuals in an ethical way. So influencing and altering their uncritically held assumptions, their cognitive biases, their limiting beliefs, in addition to transforming relationships and interactions of those who are participating in the change effort. And with complex adaptive challenges, adaptation often requires experiments and new discoveries, as well as wrong turns and dead ends. Lastly, we can characterize a complex adaptive challenge as the type of challenge that requires changes in numerous places, usually across organizational boundaries. That is, a system of change is required, that there's no silver bullet. Some examples of complex adaptive challenges in organizations are the following. How can we transform our culture to be more collaborative? How do we deliver a winning customer experience consistently? How can we comply with new government regulations? How can we disrupt our industry? How do we expand our products globally? How do we respond to losing a patent or the rise of a new competitor? How do we best integrate our merged companies? How do we accelerate our digital transformation strategy? How can we reinvent our brand? How do we transform our go-to-market strategy? How do we create a new customer-centric focused model? How can we cut costs but not operational effectiveness? How can we increase revenues without adding headcount? And so these examples are just a sampling of the types of complex adaptive challenges that organizations are having to work through today. And with all the examples provided, you can see the difficulty perhaps in having people come together to agree on what specifically the problem or issue is, or how best to solve it. It is because of this characteristic alone that we can state that all of these examples are indeed examples of complex adaptive challenges. So with that brief introduction, let me define the key frameworks that reflect the essence of the complexity leadership model. The first framework that defines the essence of the complexity leadership model is what we refer to as the universal change framework, which is a framework that operates at the macro level. And as this framework states, our goal here is to initiate 4 shifts within the system or the organization that we're working with to help resolve or solve for the complex adaptive challenge. And so those 4 shifts is to create a shared understanding of what the underlying issue or challenge is, followed by creating a shared intention of where to go. And with creating a shared understanding and shared intention, it allows us to create aligned actions, both individually and collectively. And all along the way, we're trying to shift or transform relations. We're trying to deepen existing relations, establish new relations, and restore fractured relations. These 4 shifts reflect the key outcomes in solving for a complex adaptive challenge. And as we're looking to do this, the model that we follow, or the emphasis or allocation of energy that we apply here, is to spend 70% of our time trying to create that shared understanding amongst the diverse stakeholders that you've assembled to solve for the complex adaptive challenge. We spend 20% of our time creating a shared intention, and then 10% of our time aligning of actions. This emphasis, or allocation of energy, seems to work best to create fast change with minimal resistance and that sustains over time. And what's notable about the complexity leadership model and the universal change framework in particular is that transforming relations represents maybe perhaps the most enduring aspect of the model itself. Another framework that defines the essence of the complexity leadership model is the innovation sequence framework, which operates at a meso-level. And the innovation sequence framework is comprised of 3 subsequences. There's a diagnostic sequence where we're planning to learn, a dialogic sequence where we're inquiring to learn, and an experiential sequence where we're discovering to learn. Now, what is notable about the diagnostic sequence is that not only are we planning to learn, we're also looking to expose difference of perspectives and points of views of the stakeholders that are participating in the change effort. What is notable about the dialogic sequence is that not only are we looking to inquire to learn, but we're also looking to leverage difference, to engage key stakeholders in a way to co-create the new, with each person providing their unique perspective and point of view to help in doing that. And finally, what is notable about the experiential sequence is that, in addition to discovering to learn, we're looking to integrate difference, but with the intent of achieving a common goal. And finally, another framework that reflects the essence of the complexity leadership model is the PEARL framework, which operates at micro level. And PEARL, in this case, being an acronym of the different phases of work at an operational level, of planning, experimenting, assessing, reflecting, and learn. The PEARL framework is an adaptation of the Plan, Do, Check, Act model from Deming. And we use the PEARL framework to direct all efforts across the three sequences of diagnostic, dialogic, and experiential. We refer to the PEARL framework as the inner flywheel of change. It serves as the operating core to bring about transformative change. And so, in summary then, when solving for a complex adaptive challenge leveraging the complexity leadership model, we're looking to create at a macro level a shared understanding of what the underlying issue or challenge is. From there, we create a shared intention of where to go, in getting all stakeholders rowing in the same direction. And with a shared understanding and shared intention, it naturally leads to aligning of actions, both individually and collectively. And as mentioned before, we're looking to transform relations all along the way. And it is within these four shifts that we're leveraging the innovation sequence framework. We conduct diagnostic work where we're planning to learn, followed by dialogic work where we're inquiring to learn, followed by experiential work where we're discovering to learn. And it is within these three sequences that we leverage the PEARL framework to help us organize and coordinate the work. And we do that through the 5 phases of plan, experiment, assess, reflect, and learn. So what can you do to begin leveraging the complexity leadership model in your context? Well, what I would suggest to you is that it will require an identity shift from serving in a OD change practitioner role to serving in a complexity leadership role. And we define a complexity leader as someone who is equipped to consult, host, facilitate, and coach a collective leadership amongst highly diverse others to achieve a common goal. And complexity leaders reflect 3 key capabilities. The first capability is that they help diverse others in a system to see the whole of the system, to understand and appreciate the different perspectives and points of views, including their role in contributing to current conditions. We refer to this as an out there versus in here also type of issue. Another key capability of a complexity leader is that they help create the conditions for transformative change to occur versus trying to make things happen. That is, they proactively design a strategic, dialogic-based conversational architecture to catalyze systemic change. And finally, complexity leaders help individuals, teams, and the broader system to engage with the emerging future to transform the present. So here are my final thoughts to share with you, and what I'm referring to as the next decade of disruption. In the next decade, the world will only become more VUCA-like over time, where being able to respond and adapt to fast-changing conditions will be the key to survival. It reflects a shift to resilience over robustness of operations. In addition to that, over the next decade, we will see a continued convergence of diagnostic OD, dialogic OD, and experiential learning into a unified, transformative change methodology, such as the complexity leadership model. We'll see a growing mass movement of OD practitioners formerly identifying as a traditional OD change practitioner, now identifying as a complexity leader. And so with this decade of disruption in front of us, I'll leave you with these final action steps. which is to learn and apply the complexity leadership theory of change model in your context, and to begin to develop yourself to become a competent and confident complexity leader. I can assure you that you'll be glad that you did. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you found the content in this episode helpful. Please share your comments below, and if you liked this video, hit the subscribe button and click the bell to get notified of all future weekly episodes. Also, don't forget about our upcoming course, Leading Through Complexity. If you're interested in participating in our next cohort, you can register on our website at henosispartners.com/LTC, or if you're watching on YouTube, simply click on the link in the description below. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.